Hello, poetry lovers. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Matthews, and I'm the founder of the Frost Meadow Review. Today, we're doing something very special. Today, we're recording our first conversation and poetry reading with one of our featured poets. Now, this is something that I've been looking forward to since I started the Frost Meadow Review in 2018. And given the current situation where we're all turning towards one another virtually, I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity I have to share some poetry with you and help bring it to life and hopefully brighten some of your days. So here at the Frost Meadow Review, we say poetry matters. And I really think that that is so true, especially during hard times. And I'm surprised often to see just how much power poetry can wield. So to get us going today, I'm really excited to welcome my dear friend, Meghan Sterling, who is our featured poet for the May spring and summer edition of the Frost Meadow Review. So welcome, Meghan.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. So I'm interested, we have a wonderful opportunity here to sort of chat and talk about, what's going on in the world and what's going on for you as a poet. And also to hear you read some of your beautiful work. So to get us going, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about how being a poet is for you during these hard times.
Well, I'm really grateful that I have this outlet, this sort of well-established outlet already in place for expressing the things that are going on within, right? I mean, and without. So I have been spending a lot of time at my desk. I've been laid off mostly. I'm still doing some at-home work for one of my jobs, but I'm mostly at home, sitting at my desk, looking out my window. And for the last few weeks, I'm just writing poem after poem about what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling. And I feel fortunate that I get to do that. And I have that. I know a lot of people are talking about taking up new hobbies, and that's wonderful, but I feel like this is a good opportunity for me to dive deep into something that I don't always have as much time as I would like to. So it's a mixed bag because I get to go deep and I get to work on my craft, which is the thing I love to do more than probably anything else. But it's also strange and surreal. And the poems I'm writing, they're all, they all have a very specific flavor. And it's like the flavor of looking out of my window on these rainy days that we're having, like one after the other. So we'll see at the end what I actually come up with. But for me, at least, it's been cathartic to be able to do it. So I feel grateful that I do this.
Yeah, it's a really great opportunity to sort of turn inward and take that to the next step. Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you mind sharing some of that work with us? Do you have any that you
are
reading?
I do. Well, I have a piece that I wrote for you for your publication that you graciously put up last week. And it begins, as all of my poems that I'm writing right now begin, sitting at my desk, looking out my window. What I see right now is I have a neighbor who has an empty hammock on her porch. And it just spins and spins and spins, this empty hammock on this empty street where I'm used to seeing all these children playing or things happening or cars going. There's nothing but this hammock spinning. So that helped me start this poem, and it's called Powerless. The empty hammock on the porch across the street spins and spins like a pinwheel, as if holding the slight body of a sleeping child, or a feather light in the wind that drew the snow across the city late into the night, which shod the bare spring earth with deep cover, and gave us something to blanket and fill these empty days. Windows looking out to white, blank as we shudder, succor families with meals, baths, crafts, anything to keep a loose grasp on our old lives. The house has never been so clean. The floors stripped to bone with disinfectant, poisons locked tight under sinks, hidden away from small hands that could be harmed. But there's so much harm already. The bleaches stink to our marrow, the alcohol dredged from the back of cabinets tightens across palms that shrink from touch, each forgotten motion a wince. And we hide from each other, as if in our homes we can find the only solace in strange times, in the faces of those we love, in the angry tears of our child who wants to be bigger, have more power over what happens. As I say to her, that wanting never ends.
Oh, yes, exactly.
I mean, don't you feel like a child?
Oh, for
You're
sure.
like,
What's going on around
I
us?
want things to be different,
Yes,
and I
exactly.
can't make them different.
That's, and how you put it in there is so beautiful. It gives me chills. And it's this moment reminds me of the power of spoken poetry, because of course I've seen that poem because you submitted it to the Pandemic Poetry Project on our website, and I read it, and it moved me, and I was like, yes, this is the, yes. And I actually remember reaching out to a friend and saying, hey, you need to go check this one out, because she's a mom in this situation as well, and it just resonates. It just really captures so much of the feeling right now. And it carried power before, but to hear your voice reading it and your delivery of it, it's just, I don't have words. But I've got chills. So thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah, so much of what I'm writing right now is through the lens of motherhood, of having this 3-year-old who, I mean, everything's closed. All the things that we do, my daughter is very social like me, and we go out and we play dates and playgrounds and all kinds of happenings, and there's nothing. And she wants to know why. And I have to explain to a 3-year-old, and I don't want to scare her,
Right.
that we're in a different time right now. Things are different. And it's a really interesting thing to try to navigate, because I don't want them to be different either. Right? But I have to be the guiding force that makes everything okay, that explains and understands and makes it all safe and okay.
Right.
And it doesn't feel safe and okay. So it's I wouldn't say I'm pretending, but I'm there's some theatrics involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of parenting has that moment where you have to be rising above the challenges of the moment to say, yeah, but we got this. Come here. Like, it's going to be
exactly.
Come here. Let's sing a song, or, do something else. And it is absolutely.
Yes.
I so hear you on that. Anything else you'd like to share about this time, or any other work you'd like to read related to the sort of pandemic writing you've been doing?
Sure. I'll read another one. It's also about just life now. I mean, I feel like sometimes when I'm going to write, I go to sit down and there's the blank screen and maybe also like the blank interior. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to draw something from nothing here. And somehow most of the time I'm able to, but right now I feel like there's plenty of material. And so I'm doing I'm writing a poem a day for April Poetry Month. I'm trying to do it anyway, but I feel like especially pushed to do it because it's April. And so this is another one. And they're kind of quiet and just about what's happening. So I'll read it. Rough drafts. These are rough. This was written on April 1st, which is just a few days ago. So bear with me here. But this one is called Somehow. 15 days of quiet. The stores closed. No jobs to go to. The sky slate. Who are we without our impossible lives, keeping us buoyed, keeping us half alive? I've dreamt twice this week of a plane with no pilot that I must commandeer without my hands. And somehow using my knees, I pull the wheel up and the plane rises through cloud cover to the silence just above the world. So are our days now. The morning shatters open with more frightening news, with looming hours uncertain and long, with the sense that at any moment a storm could blow in the windows. But somehow we shape things. My daughter craving her toddler routines, meals to make, walks, the slower pace welling up around our ankles like a basement flood. And together we wade, we swim, we sputter, we get through.
Well, for a rough draft, Megan, it's gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
For a rough draft, I mean like it is gorgeous, and I wouldn't know.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you. It's true. I've been dreaming about. I dreamt twice about this plane. I'm on this plane that, has no one's flying it, and I have to fly it, but I can't use my hands.
wow.
And one of the dreams was really murky and weird, but one of them was really clear. I got the plane up and to sort of smooth out above the clouds the way that planes do, when they rise, and then they get to that perfect place where everything has a stillness to it, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, flying is cool. I like this part. But whereas I find sometimes the takeoff a little nerve-wracking, but I was able to do it with my knees. And I kept thinking about that sometimes, like with my daughter, like we're having this hard day and it's raining and we're inside and we can't see her friends and we can't go to the playground. And somehow, like with our knees, we get everything to work and the day ends and we did it. And that's like one day at a time. One day right now.
Yeah. Sometimes one moment at a time.
Sometimes one moment.
But usually one day at a time.
Yeah, it's like we're all forced. The thing that we're like always saying and you're always reading, like, got to be present, you got to be in the moment and all those things. And we're like, yes, I'm going to work on being present, being in the moment. But we're not really, like, I feel like now we really have to be, and we're really seeing how hard it actually is.
Yes.
To really be in the moment. Not knowing, totally uncertain. Tomorrow is completely uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen at all. And that is shocking and also like more real than probably the illusion we normally live under, which is that we know.
Yeah, exactly.
And so all the poems, I'm trying to understand all this and figure all this out and try to understand what this all means as a human being.
Exactly. And I think that's that's what drew me to starting to do the pandemic poetry project online, which I've mentioned. We've kind of been talking about it a little bit. Just to fill everyone in, what we've done is we've actually made an open call for submissions that's on a rolling basis. We're getting submissions every day. And I'm reading as many of them as I can and trying to put a lot of them up. My goal initially was to do at least one a week. And it's ended up being often more than one a day that gets published. And that's been an incredible gift to me during this time, because as this evolves, I'm getting poems from different places in the world where things are further along than us. And for reference of time, today is April 3rd. And so Maine just went into the state of stay home, stay safe at home. Yesterday was the first day of that. So we're really in the beginning of our official mandated time to be at home, whereas other places in the world have been doing this for a lot longer than us already. And it is so fascinating how the poems sort of ebb and flow and change as this all evolves.
Right.
And so I'm loving putting the date stamps with everything that comes in and that I get to share with everyone, because it's a really cool opportunity to see, how we all handle this and how that evolves over time as we process everything that's going on. Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. And I think, as we've all needed to talk about this a lot, it's been so helpful to hear your thoughts on this. But I'd also love to, talk more about you and this upcoming Frost Meadow review with the ekphrastic poetry that you worked on. Of course, when we first started talking about you doing this project, none of this was on the table at all. So it's sort of an interesting kind of rewind in time to say, hey, what was going on for you while you were doing this? So I'm wondering if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey you took to getting to be a poet.
Sure. I'll give sure. It's always a journey. It still is a journey. Every day is a journey. Every day it's a blank screen, that you have to grapple with, which is part of the joy and excitement of it. And I always loved words and language and was very verbal and loved to read very young. And I just remember, even when I was young, reading poetry. And, you know, you'd get like in elementary school or middle school, you get those big books that just had stories and poems and all kinds of things and questions. And I would always read way ahead. And whenever I would read poems, they always intrigued me because there was something quiet about them. Because they were often small, like the poems that we would have as children. They would be these small little poems like tankas or haikus or little things where they were trying to teach us some form and structure. I remember there just being a lot of space around each one. And there was something about that that drew me. I didn't understand why or what, but I just liked it. And it was private. It wasn't something I shared with my friends. And then in 7th grade, my best friend, Christy, wrote this beautiful poem called The Moonstone. And she shared it with me. And I remember thinking, I want to do that too. I want to make something beautiful and quiet too. And that was really kind of the start of the journey of writing lots of bad poems. Oh Lord, I got a typewriter in high school and I would type like all of these sort of pseudo Allen Ginsberg, you know, because that was where I was at. And but it was so fun. I mean, they were terrible, and I knew they were bad. I would write them and I'm like, oh, these are bad, but it was still fun. And the wonderful thing that I understand now as an adult and who's been doing this for a long time is that it doesn't matter if it's bad. Like, it just doesn't even matter. Just do it because you love doing it, because it's wonderful to do. I remember being in college and I took a writing class my first semester of my freshman year. And there was so much snobbery about who should write poems. Like, only people who have the gift of poetry should write poems. And I remember thinking, like, no. Well, first of all, who determines who has the gift, right? But like, what does it matter? Just do the things you love because it's a joy to do them, and because it's a gift to yourself and to the world to be a person who is full of joy. And that's really why I do it. I just absolutely love doing it. It brings me, it's the way that my brain works. You know, for so long, you're trying to figure out, like, what am I good at? Like, why am I this way? Who am I? And I'm like, oh, I am a poet. Like, that's how my brain works. It works in these sort of images and these, I always am putting things together and kind of like comparing this thing and this thing, things that seem disparate and I'm always juxtaposing, and I'm like, oh, this is who I am. So I have to do this thing, because if I didn't do this thing, I'd be muted and I'd be lost. And so it helps me be who I am to do this thing. And so for me, and bad, there's always going to be bad poems. There still are bad poems. I still write bad poems. Just because I've been writing for over 20 years doesn't mean that I don't write a lot of bad poems. But like, you got to write through it, you know? Sometimes you have something good on the other side. Sometimes not, but it doesn't matter. And that's where I've come in these 20 plus years of writing, is just do the thing that you love to do, and they'll get better.
That's beautiful. You know? That's beautiful. And I think it really goes to the core of, why I started the Frost Meadow Review and why I want to encourage people to write, is because even in those moments when we think our poetry is terrible, like we all have it as a poet, I think, where you're like, yep, that was garbage, but okay. That felt good to write in the moment, maybe, or, something like that. But then go back and say, okay, well, maybe I could have done more with this, or maybe this is the beginning of something that I want to develop more. Although I do love some of the rawness that can come out of a poem in those times. But I think that, you're right on to say, like, just keep doing it. And the only thing that I really wanted to sort of like, yes, and and we don't know, when people receive our work, we don't know what resonates for them. And sometimes a bad poem is exactly what somebody else needs to hear in that moment, that transforms a moment or life, or, so it's like, there's so much value, I think, in writing. And I'm so grateful you're here sharing that with us, and that passion and that joy. I can feel it over here, and it's wonderful, because it is a great rainy day, and it's so nice to share that. Thank you for sharing that energy with us, because it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm the anti-snob when it comes to poetry. Everybody, everybody needs to do their thing.
Right? Yes, I believe that poetry belongs to everyone.
Totally.
Let's see. So I was going to ask you a little bit about writing as a mother, and wondering, we've talked before about how much I love your poetry about motherhood. I'm a mother myself, and it's really lovely to hear you write. And I would love to hear you read some of your work about motherhood if you'd be interested in sharing
Sure.
thoughts about that or any of your work related to that.
Sure. Being a mother, it's changed everything. I always felt a little bit apart before motherhood, and something about having my daughter has connected me more deeply to the world and to my ancestors and to my family and to the future and to her, of course, to her. I mean, I feel like there was some part of my heart that was sort of stubbornly closed. And I think I felt like it was permanently closed. It's like I felt like this little stone. And then since her birth, and even in the 3 years since she was born, I have felt it come open like a flower. And just that experience of feeling myself grow in my ability to love, in my ability to be patient. I'm not perfect, but more patient than I was, has been an incredible experience. And I write a lot about her. I mean, of course, I don't have as much time to write as I did before I had her, but I also feel more inspired than I did before I had her. So the moments count more or something, because there's just so much there to explore when I do have a moment to write. And so I've been surprised pleasantly about how much I enjoy being a mother. As hard as it is, and this is an especially hard time to be a parent of small children. I've had a lot of neighbors who will be out walking and I'll be with my daughter and they're like, wow, I have a teenager and I'm sure glad I don't have a 3-year-old anymore, like that would be really hard. I'm like, yeah, it is really hard. It's really hard. But yet there are so many beautiful moments. So this is one of the ekphrastic poems, which I can talk about in a bit, that I wrote. An ekphrastic poem, of course, is a poem based on a work of art of some kind. This is a poem that's based on an image by an artist friend of mine named Wiley Garcia. She's a Vermont-based artist, really talented. And the piece is called Bliss. And so I wrote about my daughter's birth. And here it is. A mountain inside me, a fish. I never thought I could stomach giving birth. The very thought. And still you swam, you wailed my flesh, stretching the very silt of me until I was star-marked. Blood vessels burst in a constellation, heralding your arrival across my chest. And all the day before, I felt the sea of you rock and rock and rock until the pain began, until you insisted it was time for me to be more than me, to be more. And you rode your wave out slowly while I creaked like an old boat as you slipped. I just caught fish into our hands, and as my body deflated, my heart began to grow big and bright, like the heart in the middle of the page when I write, Mama loves you, and you color it red with your bold and earnest strokes.
I don't get speechless easily, I really do. And I just love that poem. I loved it when I read it in your submission. Of course, that's going to be in the Frost Meadow review alongside the painting that or it's not a painting, is it? What was
their drawings?
Their drawings for that one. Yes, and they're gorgeous. They're gorgeous drawings. I remember reading that one and feeling so connected to it, obviously as a mother myself, that it's so real and it's also so beautiful. And I love the broad strokes at the end. It just, I don't know. I always, hate when I listen to podcasts and stuff of people responding to the poem that just got read, and I find myself in that moment and I don't have the right thing to say because there's nothing I can say that says back to you, thank you, the way I want to. You know, does that make sense?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So thank you.
You're welcome. It's my daughter. She's just given me limitless material.
I can relate to that as a mother, that there's so much that comes from these moments. And I love the way you're capturing them and sharing them with us. Yeah.
More thing. Yeah. Do you want me to talk a little bit about ekphrastic poetry?
That would be wonderful.
I just read one of mine. So I've loved for such a long time working from a visual prompt. I just find it incredibly inspiring, and I tend to prefer abstract, actually. For me, it's more fuel for my imagination. And so these 10 poems that I wrote for the collection that I submitted for Frost Meadow Review. So you would ask for 10 new poems, or, a collection of poems to go be published. And so I thought, I'm going to write a collection specifically for this. What do I want to do? I was thinking about it. I thought, I have a friend who's a really talented artist. I'm going to ask her if she'll provide me with 10 pieces of art, and I'm going to write poems based on her collection. So it's a collection, it's 10 works of art that are a collection of her art, like as a whole. And then I was going to write 10 poems as a collection of poetry to go alongside. And I was like, this is a great idea. And I really am happy with the experience. So what I did was each poem is the name of the painting, or excuse me, the drawing. And then I looked at the work and I worked with the title, and I just went for it. And it felt very intuitive. It felt very freeing as well, somehow, because I was able to use this sort of outside image to dive deep into myself. It was like I had a partner in the dive or something with me. And I was just so excited with what came out. Kind of pushed me a little bit outside sometimes. So I was really, really happy with it. And so I try to do, I do ekphrastic poetry like once a month. So Rattle, the online magazine, has an ekphrastic poetry challenge, and they put an image up, and I'll work on a poem about the image. And sometimes they're cool and sometimes they're not, but it's always a fun endeavor. Yeah.
That is amazing. I should look into that sometime. I've never really written a lot of ekphrastic poetry. I've written a couple. There's a picture on my wall over there that inspired me once, and I wrote one related to that. But that's a really neat thing to know about, that there is. I love those sort of ongoing challenges to writers, and I think, for our listeners, like, it's one of those things that I can't encourage enough of, that sort of just write, just find things. There's so many little seeds of inspiration around you.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of those are available through Submittable. If you look around on there, there are so many ideas that come, at least in for me, that's one of the sources of them. Megan, I don't know if you have any other resources that you'd recommend people go check out for just, the plethora of ideas. And
it's kind of cool when magazines have themed sort of, all calls for submissions, when they're like, this month we're doing about, the environment, like your pandemic poetry.
Right.
Actually, I wrote my poem because I saw your call for submissions. I was like, oh, that sounds good. I'll do one of those. And so I did.
That makes me feel very special, because of course, that same feeling of powerlessness, I turned to the Frost Meadow Review as a platform to say, hey, wait a second. Yes, I'm powerless, but we're all powerless.
Right.
I wonder if other people feel this badly too. And so that's really cool for me to hear that, by seeing me saying, hey, anybody I'll put it online, sort of call. that inspired you. Really, that warms my heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
But for people who want to try doing ekphrastic poetry, Rattle once a month, the beginning of the month, posts an image, and they do a challenge where they choose the two best. The artist chooses a poem, and then the editor chooses a poem. And it's also so cool to read what people have come up with. Some of them will just blow your mind how incredible.
Right.
So I'm not the only person who really, really is inspired by art for writing.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
so cool. Well, I'm so grateful you've brought it, front and center for the Frost Meadow Review right now, because I think it's a really amazing thing, and during this time, it's a really cool new thing for me to learn about. And I think that's one of the things I'm really grateful about being the editor of this, is that I get to read so many poems, and people bring new things to me that I never would have thought of. And it's been a really cool opportunity for me to expand my own art and my own appreciation for the arts in general.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you might be interested in sharing maybe one or two more of those ekphrastic poems.
Sure.
Yeah,
I would be happy to.
Okay.
All right. So while I was working on the collection, we were dealing with a lot of fires in the world, in Australia and the Amazon. And so that, I'm, one of my passions is concern over the climate. And the book I co-edited just recently came out. Yeah, the anthology, Dangerous New World. So that's a topic that's really the forefront of my mind all the time, and I see it related to what's happening in the world right now. So I wrote a poem that I like quite a bit. It's based, of course, on one of Wiley Garcia's beautiful drawings. It's called Her Body Bends Like a Tent on Fire. I was like, oh, there we go. All right. So this is that poem. Her body bends like a tent on fire. Her worth in her body, so they said, and it drummed into her, entire thoughts cast into the wind as it feeds fire, as fire came into the woodlands that were once wild. We all were then. I remember this, building a cairn to honor the wood spirit, building a fire to warm me, sleeping beside it in safety. The day it shifted like clouds and light before a storm. Their words, what is her worth? In her body, legs, arms, face, breasts, hair, the body as measure, sudden awareness of the body, sudden separation of the body from the earth, how things begin to die, the woods growing dim, and how long it takes to journey back, to come together again, body and heart. The burnt out ends and understory bracken, too easy to set to light, scattered, dry, as the Amazon rolls with fire, as the world grieves her losses under a too near sun, as the world and her heart speak while her body burns.
So instead of me responding, is there anything you'd like to say after reading it about that?
Well, it's, again, it's the way that I bring things together in my head. There's a woman's body, and there's the earth, right? And the earth as Gaia, as a woman, and as, the earth as material, as a thing, almost as if it has flesh. And I just am always thinking about the way we treat women, the world treats women, and the way we treat the earth, and the way we objectify women, the way we have to, the way we have to deal with the world treating us a certain way, seeing us a certain way, the way we can begin to see ourselves through that lens. as the way that the world is treated. And I just, for me, the two are inextricably connected. And so I just saw those fires in the Amazon and in Australia as the destruction of like a woman's body. And so that's the poem that came out. And it's abstract, and I enjoyed writing it, though. Sometimes when I am a little more abstract, there's a freedom in making connections that isn't always there when you're working with a form. And so I enjoyed working on that poem. I think I'm happy with it. I am. It's but it's not a comfortable poem.
True.
You know, it's not like some of the poems I write about my daughter, you know, afterwards you're like, oh, there's, oh, like, or even if the poems I write about my daughter are kind of sad, it's like, oh, that's touching or tender. But sometimes I write poems that it's like, ooh, oh, you know, and like if I read them at a reading, sometimes I have some poems that the room is just like, you know, and I'm like, hey, I'm living my truth,
guys. Yeah. But
deal with it,
there's
you know,
reality in that. And I think that's one of the things that I love about your work is that you do go there. You know, I think that freedom that you allow yourself to go in the places that we as humans, it's the human experience, right? It's all of us living as imperfect beings in a very imperfect world and stumbling around as best we can. And of course there are intense and hard feelings, hard things that come from those times. And I love that your work goes there. I think that's very important.
Thanks. I mean, if it wasn't for discomfort, I wouldn't really write much poetry at all.
Right?
I feel like a lot of the poetry I write is I'm writing through discomfort.
That makes sense. Me too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when things are good and the ship is easy sailing and it's beautiful seas, you know, I can say that. I can be like, hey, look, the sky is blue and the ocean's blue and life is good. And hey, look, the birds are great. I love the birds. I'm going to write a couple bird poems. I love bird poems.
Yeah.
But that real depth comes from hard times. And so I hope that our listeners and the poets out there in the world and the wannabe poets out there in the world, you know, really turn inward to that right now and say, you know what, as the world suffers right now, as we all feel losses right now, because there's so many losses right now for everyone.
Yeah.
There is a way to handle that can help, and it's write about it. And if you want to share it, send it to the Frost Meadow Review, and we might even be able to publish it. And it's, you know, if not, just be part of processing and sharing that, for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to read before we wrap up? Maybe one more, and then we'll.
Do you want me to read one more ekphrastic poem?
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we'll. I'll just have a couple of things to share with our readers.
Yeah. All right. This is one that's about my daughter, but also about uncomfortable subjects, state of the world, etc. So I'm going to go for it because let's just go deep.
It's real.
All right. So let's be real.
It's real.
So this one is based on a beautiful drawing by Wiley Garcia, and it's called Celestial Event. And still, that song about the star I sing with my daughter, as if by wishing we can change these things, these burning forests, these raised forests, flame ripping its way across the color maps and curves of the globe, shooting red into the center of what was so much green. But the truth of those colors is black and white ash and smoke, and the skeletons of villages, and a child's toy scorched in the center of what was her family's bedroom. Despite the stars twinkling above us, light carved into darkness, the same as that sky I looked at when I first saw a winter night, when the sky is massive enough to allow us to see where we actually stand in regards to space. the moon. The Milky Way like a grease smear on our glasses, a spray of salt across a table. And only those stars shining light down from the dark are preserved from our bulldozers due to their distance, already dead.
Yes, it's real.
Yeah. It's again, it's like, it's the bringing together, right? Singing, one of my daughter's favorite songs is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? And I sing it with her, and there's so much joy in that. And meanwhile, there's this world that we're dealing with, and things are just amping up. I mean, now it's even more real, the hurt and the pain and the death and the sickness of our world, right? I mean, now it's not even a metaphor anymore.
Right.
And, you know, thinking about these maps that we were looking at with those fires, right? There were these color maps of fire, and they were all red, right? And so it looks like this, it's just these colors that we see. And there's an abstraction when we look at colors, right? And so then I thought about, what are these colors really? What is the world? So we look down at it, right? What is the world when we're in it? And it's villages destroyed. It's people dying. It's, you know, things scorched and skeletal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is when you're in it. That's what's real.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just going there and not flinching away or pretending, but going in close and trying to look at it. I feel like that's a lot of what I do, is trying to look at what's really happening and make it real for myself. And if I didn't write poetry, I would probably be much more anxious than I am. But because I have this outlet that I look at things through,
Right.
and I have like this piece of art at the end of my examination, I think that it allows me to be a mostly healthy person.
I completely agree. I think that that's exactly what makes poetry matter so much, is that it can, I remember you said at a reading a while ago that the anxiety led you to start that anthology. And that really, you know, channeled that. And I think that there is something really incredible about the ability and the energy spent to go there, to go deep, to formulate something, and then to be able to externalize that and put it on the table as it's real. It is anxiety. It's also real. It's anxiety, and it's about the world, and we all share this world, and it does make a difference as people, you know, try to understand everything that's going on around them.
Yeah.
And internally, all the internal battles that every single one of us carries that are now being played out within this larger context. It's so powerful. I'm so grateful to you, Meghan. Thank you so much for sharing yourself and your energy and your time with us today.
Of course. My pleasure.
Yay. Well, before we wrap up, I just want to say a couple things to our readers and to poetry lovers in general. I just want to tell you guys, there is this opportunity. I am accepting submissions every day right now. So you can submit poems related to your experiences during this hard time. They can be submitted right to me at submit@frostmeadowreview.com. And you feel free to go check out the poems that have already been published. It might make you feel better to read what other people are processing about this time. And that can be found at frostmeadowreview.com. And then also, I wanted to make a note that the next edition of the spring and summer Frost Meadow Review, which of course features Meghan and her acrostic poetry in its beautiful collection alongside the drawings that she talked about, will be published in May. And in respect to what's going on in the world, we're going to actually publish that in two formats. We've never done this before, so hopefully it goes well. We're going to publish it as an ebook that's going to be available for free online. And then we're also going to publish it in the regular print edition so that we can have some nice hard copies for anyone who wants that. I have a strong feeling that right now especially is the time to pull together, and it resonates with a personal desire I have to keep poetry open. We talked a little bit earlier about snobbery with poetry and about access to poetry, and I think that many poets among you will resonate with this and will understand this, that there are a lot of journals that require running their business based on a submission fee model, and I completely respect the need to do that. I'm trying extremely hard not to do that with the Frost Meadow Review, because I feel that when creators have to pay to have their work read, and pay and pay and pay, they may be small fees, it may be a $2 submission fee, but if you're paying a $2 submission fee over and over and over again for various poems, when rejection is the norm, it can be very expensive. And I, as a poet myself, I know that it can be cost prohibitive at times. And the last thing I want to see as someone who loves poetry and who loves people processing their feelings through writing and sharing them is that people get priced out of poetry. And that's heartbreaking to me. So we have no submission fee. Please feel free to submit. Please feel free to submit now to the Pandemic Poetry Project. And also later when we put out our call for will be fall and winter 2020 coming up. And I'll probably be posting that submission call later this summer. So when that opens up, please feel free to submit. I love hearing lots of different voices, and it's been a wonderful gift to me to have you all share your work with me. So Meghan, thank you for being part of that journey with me through all of this, and I'm so grateful I met you, and it was a real delight to be published alongside you in Balancing Act 2, and then to get to meet you through that. And Meghan, you did a wonderful job running some poetry readings that were just really inspiring to me personally. I got a lot out of the hard work you did organizing reading after reading and so many poets. That was really moving for me.
Last winter was wild.
I can only imagine. It was really, really cool. And I had the honor of being your last reader on one of those, and that just meant so much to me to get to bring that home after all the hard work you did, getting us all there and sharing work. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for all of this and for being alongside us on this journey.
Thank you, Emily, for all you do.
Oh, thanks. All right, well, I'll let you go back to being a mother.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.